Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Agatha All Along. I almost said Wandavision there. This is episode 6. It's called Familiar by Thy Side. So spoilers for the episode. This is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you to Alison for picking the show. And this, not unsurprisingly, goes back and explains the history of Teen, or I should say Billy, either Billy Wicked or Billy Maximoff, whatever you want to go with, really, and explains kind of the how we got here with him and what's going on with him. And that he was a regular teenager celebrating his bar mitzvah, of all things, right before he dies in a car crash, somewhat related to what's going on in Wandavision with the big bubble sort of expanding and whatnot. And seemingly in that moment, he dies, and his body is taken over by Billy, Wanda's son, who wasn't even a real person, from what I remember. It was something she kind of made up, but he's kind of a living idea now, and now has a body of someone else. And then it goes from there and sort of explains how we get to everything that we've seen with him up until this point. So, obviously it's a big episode. I suspect people who love the show probably adore this episode. I did not. I found it a little bit tedious. It's got a lot of things that I don't particularly like that much. First of all, Teen, aka Billy, was easily my least favourite character before this episode, and this one didn't do anything to sway my opinion on that. Especially since it didn't even feel like he really changed that much. When we come back to the present part of the timeline after the end of last episode, and he has that big scene at the end where he talks to Agatha, it kind of felt like his personality's not really that changed. It also didn't feel like he already figured out who he was by the sounds of it, and it's more just that he had kind of a Hulk out moment when his mother was mentioned, and his reactions to seemingly killing the others feels just a little bit non-existent to me. But all a bit strange. I didn't really feel like it altered like who he was that much. It still feels like he's just the same kid, but a little angrier. And that was kind of it. It was probably the least interesting way of taking it forward for me, if I'm completely honest. But yeah, you got that. You also have a lack of Aubrey Plaza, which is a big negative as far as I'm concerned, because she's the best part of the show. And then, on top of all that, you give me Ralph freaking Boner once again. Or Bonner, or however you're pronouncing it. Which, funny enough, was one of the things that completely sent Wandavision off a cliff when I watched that show. The teasing of how big that could be, that they had that version of Quicksilver in the MCU, only for it just to be played as kind of a dumb joke. Was not something I liked at the time. It was something that felt like it was just a lot more dumb than I think anyone was hoping for. And having him come back, and I get at this point it's not as big of a deal because it's just kind of a cute reference more than anything of like, hey, remember this show? Remember that dumb character? But we're going to have a few more jokes at his expense. That's all fine and well, but I did not like seeing him again. I did not enjoy the scene where he's the deep throat telling young Billy about Wanda and about the town and about what's going on with Agatha and all that. Yeah, I kind of just... I was... At best, I was nonplussed when he appeared. So, all in, didn't really like this episode. It seems like people who enjoy the show are really digging this one. I think, you know, a part of it is that the core mystery with Teen being kind of what the show is largely revolving around, was always going to lead to me not being that excited about where it goes, I think. And it was kind of the same thing in Wandavision to an extent, is that I kind of liked some of the things that we're doing episode to episode, and some of the things that we're poking at, or some of the ideas that we're using by using the TV format to shake things up. But once it actually got to what it was always intending to go to, right? Once it revealed who the villain was and it revealed what was actually going on, it kind of just became really dull to me. And I think I went in with a more negative attitude to this show compared to that show because I kind of expected it this time. But it's kind of playing out in that way for me, where now that it's actually revealing what's going on, I'm less and less interested in what's happening. I will say, that's not to say there's nothing good or entertaining. Like, I did think it was amusing at the very least seeing some of the stuff from episode 1 again, but from Billy's perspective, where we see just how ridiculous Agatha is in her detective role and what's actually happening in those scenes, and like how she appears to everyone else who's not in the spell. You know, she's the only one who could see the true crime TV show she was in. Everyone else was just kind of playing along, and she was, you know, she has like a toy thing that's a gun and whatever, and she's acting, you know, Kathryn Hahn acts more over the top for it, which I do think is entertaining. You know, that stuff's fine. Like, I was okay with that. But, you know, a lot of this episode is kind of like, okay, here's who the character was before he was taken over by Wanda's son. We see him at the bar mitzvah. Almost all of the witches, in some form or another, appear in his story throughout this episode. Lilia being the one who actually puts the sigil on him was kind of a surprise. I wasn't. It was kind of weird because she does it before he actually gets taken over by Wanda's son. So obviously she could see that was coming, but that was an interesting little touch, is that he wasn't even him yet when she did that. But, you know, we see that Alice is the police officer who comes by the crash. We see Jen on YouTube when he's looking up stuff. So we get a sense of some of these characters showing up in the story. I do hope it's not the last we've seen of them. I hope, as much as it appears that Jen and Lilia are dead, I hope that it turns out they're not, because it feels like a bit anticlimactic just to kill them off like that. And even Alice's death felt pretty anticlimactic, so I suspect they will come back. How satisfying it'll be when they come back, I don't know at this point, but you do see them throughout this episode. But what they do set up is that, you know, they do the whole moment where the crash happens and you hear the heartbeat fade, and then he wakes up, and of course he's confused, he's got amnesia, and puts things together as the episode goes on, and tries to convince himself who he is and whatnot. But he clearly is reading people's minds. Like, it's a recurring thing with his parents, where he hears them having like scared thoughts, you know, ideas of like, oh, what if he doesn't get his memory back? This is really difficult, and it's, you know, putting a lot of stress on him. But they're not actually saying it out loud, so they're not doing anything wrong. They're just having natural worries, but it's making him freak out. So they play with that a little bit, and sort of him dealing with that. But we do get a time jump though. Like, you know, once he kind of like tries to calm down and just convince himself this is who he is now, we skip 3 years, and he's, you know, whatever age he is now. And it's right before actually the start of the show, because like this leads right into him going into Agatha's house to steal an item. Which it turns out he's stealing an item because he needs it to break the spell that she's under, because that's what he wants to do. But this revolves largely around introducing the fact that he's got a boyfriend named Eddie, who, once again, this problem creeps up that he is hearing his thoughts when they're getting intimate, and knows that he's going to try and say I love you, so he kind of beats him to the punch a little bit. And it's all kind of awkward and kind of clumsy teenage romance stuff. And they're kind of sickeningly sweet together. It's, you know, it's whatever. I do wonder if we're going to see this character again. I feel like you spent this time setting up this boyfriend character. It makes sense to me that when Billy is maybe going off the deep end towards the end of the show, perhaps he might be the thing that's able to bring him back down to reality. Maybe he can be an anchor for him in some way. And a good anchor, not a bad anchor. Like, he's weighing him down, but like good in the sense that he's keeping him down to earth. It's all very contextual when you say that, I guess. But yeah, I like, you know, it spends time doing this, and kind of the like, you know, he tells Eddie that he's not really Billy from this family. He's actually someone else. Like, he died and came back as someone else, but he doesn't know who. And that's ultimately the investigation that leads to Ralph Bonner, who is Deep Throat in the car park. I mean, I don't know what to say about this scene. Like, I feel like people who thought the Ralph Bonner stuff was funny are going to love seeing him again, and they're going to love this sequence and all the little jokes about him having a one-man show that he needs to sell tickets for, about being, you know, scared from Wanda and from Agatha. I'm sure people are lapping that up if they really like that development on Wandavision. But because I didn't, because I kind of hated this character, and we're already in an episode for a character that I don't find particularly interesting, and I don't even know what it is. He's just kind of a whiny teen. I think ultimately he's kind of a hipstery, whiny teen. Even like the posters on his bedroom annoyed me. Like he's got like Labyrinth and Dark Crystal posters up, and it's like stuff just designed to be someone I don't like, because I don't like those things. I don't like 80s fantasy. I don't like any fantasy really, but it's a bit in the emo side for my taste. So it's kind of a weird ask for an episode too, because like in a vacuum, I tend to like episodes like this where you've got a character you've been teasing a mystery with throughout the season, and then you give them an episode that focuses on them, where you break the format of the show. And this very much breaks the format of the show, because the format of the show up until this point, for the last several episodes, has been, find a trial, go into the house, solve the trial. Some things will happen on either side of it, but that's basically what the episodes have been for the last 3 episodes. This breaks that, goes back, adds a little bit of interesting context to what it was like being around Agatha when she was under the spell. But for the most part, it tells the story of who he is. I think, for me, aside from just finding the character a little bit annoying, I think the bigger problem I have with this is that I don't really feel like it's really added that much to the character in terms of layers, right? In terms of like everything from before, right? Everything who he is. I don't really feel like we have a different personality now. Because it felt like he just made do with the fact that he wasn't really who he was before. And obviously when he talks to Ralph Bonner, that's when he finds out, he hears the name Wanda, and he hears the name that she had a son named Billy and another son named Tommy. Or Toby, or Agatha called him Toby. I think it was Tommy. Or was it Tony? I don't know, I'm forgetting that. Which is just adding to the joke. But, and that's the thing. He wants to find his brother. That's ultimately what it turns out his goal is in the Dark Road. Agatha pieces it together. He's not looking for his mom. He's not looking for his dad. He's looking for his brother. Because that's what he yells when he wakes up in the car. He yells out his brother's name. So before the amnesia kind of sticks in. If it even is amnesia, maybe he just remembers who he really was. But I don't think he does, because it feels like he has like floods of like feelings and memories when he finally hears those names again. So I do think it's just like a sort of reflex where it's like a little offshoot from what he was doing before, where he says Tommy, and then he does just kind of not know who he is and what's going on. But I genuinely don't feel like he's that different to what we knew him as before. Yeah, like I say, he's a little bit angrier, right? He knows that he's powerful, even though he can't access it that well, because he tries to use his power again at the end of the episode, and it doesn't quite go off. So he's not quite figured out how to use his power yet, but he clearly is very powerful. But I don't really feel like the character's personality... Like, I feel like the ending of last episode really set up that he was this evil mastermind who made himself forget. Now, obviously, it turned out to be Lilia who'd put the sigil on him, but I think the implication at the end of the last episode was that he'd done it himself, and that he is actually a much more confident, villainous character that that was awoken at the end of last episode, and it felt like he was going after everyone and seemingly killed 2 of the witches. And then we go to this episode, and it kind of feels like it was a moment of confusion, and he's still just kind of who he was, with a little bit more attitude. There's not really much of a difference to him. And it kind of makes the ending of the last episode feel like a little bit of a cop-out to me. A little bit cheap, perhaps. It doesn't really quite sit with me, or feel like enough has changed because of the ending of the last episode. I think there's always a risk as well when you do these stories where you go back and explain how this other character on the other side of the story got to this point. There is a little bit of a risk of feeling like you're just checking boxes of things that have to link up with what you've already seen. And I'm not going to say it felt exactly like that, but it did kind of feel like there wasn't some exciting extra layer in his story from before he went to the town to get to Agatha that added some extra space to it. There was no... I don't know, like, I feel like exploring the relationship he had with his, like, new parents would have been quite interesting, because they seem like decent people, and they also seem pretty cool with the fact that he's gay. Like, they're kind of like, like when he comes in towards the end of soon before we flash back to the present day timeline, he comes home from his meeting with Deep Throat and whatnot, and they just kind of casually say, "Oh, where's Eddie? Oh, we made dinner. We thought you'd be joining us." Like, they're very cool with it, and it'd be very interesting to explore that side of the story and maybe flesh out this idea that, does he actually care about these parents, or is he just kind of playing along and doesn't give a shit because it's not really his parents? Like, there actually seems like there's more of an interesting lens to look at it through there. So I thought, yeah, there's potential there, and there's maybe some interesting ideas, but it kind of, I don't know if he gets enough of a like a push as to why now he's going after Agatha and the truth. Like, he tells Eddie the truth of, like, at least what he knows or what he feels about himself, and you could sort of say that's like an allegory for coming out again or something. Like, oh, there's like he's not really him because he's kind of there's at one point in this episode he even says the line, "I don't want to go back in the closet." That is literally a line of dialogue that he says to Agatha, which felt a bit on the nose. But there's not really much to motivate why now. Arguably, other than maybe you could say, oh, because he's been open to his boyfriend and he's willing to help him, that's given him the confidence. But it doesn't really feel like maybe an event or something that inspires why he wants to go looking for the truth now would have helped. It just kind of felt like, oh, just because now. Right? Because ultimately, once he tells Eddie and he's like, hey, I've done this research and blah, 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 he's already kind of like made contact with this guy on the internet who turns out to be Ralph Bonner, right? This is just stuff that's been ongoing. There's nothing in this part of the story that inspires or motivates the action now, specifically. It's just kind of like, oh, now we're just going to do it. And I think that makes it a little bit less interesting, because if there was a sense of urgency to it, because like he remembers something, or maybe like something bad happens with the parents where they have a fight, and he, I don't know, maybe hurts someone and has to figure out why he's hurt someone or has to fix it. Like, what if he accidentally hurt someone with his powers, and it was more about trying to get to the truth because he has to figure out a way to reverse something that he's done by accident, or something like that. I don't know. I'm spitballing and giving ideas, but just something that really provokes him into action as to why now he has to go looking for answers, which will lead him to Agatha and lead to the Witch's Road. Instead, it all just kind of feels like he has as much motivation at that point in the story as he did when he got back after the hospital before the time jump. It doesn't really feel that there's that much of a difference from a character momentum point of view, and I feel that very lacking. So, and that's the kind of, that lack of urgency is what gives me the feeling that we're kind of going through the motions of just ticking the next box on the list of things that he's supposed to have done based on what we saw from Agatha's side of the story back in episode 1. And that feeling leaves me feeling very underwhelmed. And that ultimately is why I find this underwhelming, on top of just not liking the character that much, on top of not liking Ralph Bonner and missing the more entertaining personalities that this show has. I always bring up Aubrey Plaza because I like her a lot, but even Agatha, even like Kathryn Hahn, chewing the scenery and having fun with her performance is definitely much preferable to this. So yeah, I do think this is a weak episode. I think it's a mediocre episode, and I think it's going to be love for people who just love characters in shows like this and just are happy to get more of them. But I don't actually think it really fleshens them out that much, at least to me, in a satisfying way. By all means, comment below. Tell me why you disagree. I'm happy to hear it. Well, I don't know if I'm happy to hear it, but I'll put up with it at the very least. Yeah, it's one of those things where, I'm going through the episode and it's playing out its beats, and I know that obviously we're going to get like at least one big scene at the end where it's like, okay, this is going to be after everything that happened last episode. But a good 3/4 or so of the episode are doing this backstory and building up to things. And it's not all bad ideas or whatever, but like, if I'm not feeling it, I'm not feeling it. And then you get to kind of the scene that takes place after the events of last episode, and I don't feel like it. I don't feel like it follows on from how he was acting or how the episode presented him at the end of the last one, where it seemed like, oh, he's kind of evil. He's just done something horrific. Here, it does feel, it doesn't feel like it kind of pays off on that as much for as far as I'm concerned. It just kind of feels like he's still him. He kind of shows like a second of like regret when Agatha brings up what happened to the other two witches. and then it just kind of from there, she walks around, she guesses what he's looking for, and he just says at the end, "I'm not that nice," because she says, "Oh, next one to get to the trial, or last one to get to the trial is a nice person," and the final line of the episode is him saying, "I'm not that nice," which, okay, that feels like a really lame final moment to me, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because effectively the end of the last episode was the exact same ending, but was at least a visual, like, more interesting way of doing it, whereas at the end of this episode, it's literally just him almost looking at the camera and saying, "I'm not that nice. I'm bad. I'm scary. I'm not a good person." Like, him just saying that is like a much weaker version of what they did at the end of the last episode, where he just did something that looked evil and looked menacing, right? I'm not saying the last episode's ending worked for me that well, but it was objectively on paper, it was a better implementation of getting that idea across than him just saying it like this at the end. I mean, I guess the point is that he feels that way about himself, and his own self-worth and how he views himself is a big part of the character's story. And I can get on board with that. I can understand that, but I just don't think it's that well done. So I didn't really like this episode. Very lukewarm for me. I don't think it added that many layers to the story. It felt like it was just going down a checklist of like, okay, here's what happened when the Wandavision stuff ended, and here's how he found Agatha. And the only sort of character thing they really do for him is to give him this boyfriend character, who I don't think has really been brought up so far. And it's fine, like, it's a good idea to give him something else that is a separate from, like, his story and his journey and what he's trying to do. But it feels so separate right now that it's hard to feel like it's having that much of an impact yet. So I don't know. But like I say, that lack of urgency and as to why why he needs to find the truth now is a problem for me. It makes it just feel like we're going through the motions, and just the writing feels a bit thin for my tastes. Or at the very least, it's not to a style that clicks with me and makes me excited about what the characters are doing. So, all right, there you go. That's me complaining for 20 or so minutes. About the new Agatha. We'll see what happens next week. I don't know, but it was a beefier episode again. This was a good 45 or so minutes, so at least it was a more I don't know. I don't want to say fulfilling, because I didn't find it fulfilling, but yeah, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me. You can, of course, let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below, and by all means, disagree. We are all your heart. It's fine. It's good. Different things work for different people. I just don't think this is very good. But yeah, support over on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to help keep all the content coming, both here on the TV review channel, but also over on the movie podcast channel, MailFuzz Movies. Go check out that stuff. Like, subscribe, ding the bell, all those things help. But thank you very much once again for watching. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?